Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome to Resiliency Matters. This is where we take the big resiliency research and best practices and break it down into small, bite-sized pieces that you can begin using immediately to strengthen yourself and others. What if you could learn the connection between resiliency and creativity and how to nurture both? Would you spend the next 28 minutes with us? What if in the next 10 minutes you could hear the story of a community leader who went from Harvard Law School to having to relearn how to read, and how this personal trauma shaped his whole perspective on our ability to heal ourselves and others? Would you hang out with us? Who is us? Meet my other half today, Chuck Peters, president of the Gazette Company. Chuck is an innovator in our community. He is a collaborative leader, and he is very well positioned to talk community resiliency. You may be surprised and inspired by his personal experience of overcoming adversity. Welcome, Chuck.
Right. Thank you, Molly.
So you are an Iowa boy. I know you take great pride in
Yes.
Iowa.
Yeah.
Tell us about the journey to Harvard Law School.
Well, I grew up in Fort Dodge, Iowa, and my father was an attorney, uncle was an attorney, whole family was attorneys.
Okay.
They always said, do anything but practice law. So I went to University of Iowa, and studied sleep research, which was the hot topic at the time. But then there was no funding for that. And one of the things that I had developed was I was a really good test taker. So, got good test scores, got good grades, could apply to Harvard Law School, did. It was just after Watergate, and I thought, that's the place to be, in Harvard Law School.
Okay. And what was your experience at Harvard Law?
Well, it was, first of all, a really wonderful experience to start. People from all over the world, about 500 people coming together, and got to meet all kinds of diverse people and have wonderful experiences. Did well in the first semester. And in the second semester, took a property class where the professor really wanted to focus on why is there property. And I said, we're lawyers. We deal with property, right? What are we having this discussion for? Well, that discussion went on for about 3 weeks. And in frustration, after class, I was doing a handstand on the desk. Just total frustration in the winter, and ended up being asked by my classmates to show them some other great gymnastics I had done. So I did a backflip into a headstand and smashed my head on a concrete step.
So how did that injury impact you?
Well, immediately when it happened, I knew that I was severely stunned and I should rest. So I did what you should not do. I immediately went home and went to bed. Don't ever do that after a head injury.
Right.
But went to bed at noon and woke up at 8 o'clock the next morning with severe nausea, blurred vision, could not stand up, and had slurred speech, a terrible headache, terrible ringing in the ears, knew I was severely ill, and my wife of basically 18 months took me to the emergency room where they did a new technology at the time, a CAT scan, and determined that I had a subdural hematoma in the back of my head that had caused my brain to basically shut down.
So what did the recovery look like, or the medical treatment on that?
Well, the first thing was, do we need to drill a hole in your head to relieve the pressure? That was the big question. So I was in the hospital for about 3 days while they determined that. And then I came back every week for another CAT scan to see whether the swelling was going down. But in that time, which was about a month, I still had the blurred vision, the ringing in the ears, the headaches, and the inability to stand up for any length of time.
And we talk about the importance of support structures. What was going on with your family at that time, or additional support networks?
Well, my wife was very supportive, but we were pretty much new people in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I had a few friends at law school that were extraordinarily supportive. The law professors were very supportive. Frankly, the medical profession was not that supportive. I was being treated by neurosurgeons who were very concerned about the physical aspects of things, but I got absolutely no counseling, which is still kind of astounding to me today. That it was all, well, you've been hurt and it'll take a while to get better, and it's going to be like peeling an onion and you'll eventually get better.
And we do a lot of talk and teaching to support our educators, but I think that is such an important point. I've had personal experiences where a doctor has been more cold and bedside manner and more official, and I've had doctors after severe losses who've said, you'll always have this, and tuck it away in your heart, and I felt understood, I felt that compassion. So as an aside, how many years later has this been? Decades later, you can still remember how you were being treated.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So I think that's such an important point for our audience here to just take that moment to realize it is how we make others feel, not what we say to them all the time or what we do for them, but how do you make them feel? Now, we've talked about, you've come across research later in life that kind of helped you understand your recovery. And one of those researchers, I believe, is Marianne Wolf. What is her work?
Well, Marianne Wolf is a researcher at Tufts University who, using the latest brain imaging technology, has pretty well shown that we are genetically designed or constructed for oral language, but we do not have existing neural structures for reading. That each individual is creating their own neural network to allow them to read. So in my recovery, I could not read a paragraph and comprehend it. So it took me almost a year to be able to stand up regularly without falling down. And it was over 2 years before I could even begin to try to read a paragraph and comprehend it. And then in doing that work, that was the hardest work I've ever done in my life. And I kept wondering, did I do it correctly? Right? Have I really learned the correct way to do things? But then her work was so freeing for me to say, there is no correct way to do it. We are each individually creating our own neural networks that enable us to read print automatically.
So play to your strengths, find your own way forward is what you're saying. And how has that impacted how you try new things in your life or how you encourage others to try new things?
Well, a line a friend of mine uses often is, it's impossible or it's obvious. Right? So for a long time in learning to read, it just seemed like the hardest thing ever. And then it started to flow. I've had other experiences, learning to fly a plane, learning to dance. I use learning to dance often because I was known as not a dancer. And my whole family laughed at my dancing capabilities. When I was asked to do a Dancing for the Stars charity function, and decided to go outside my comfort zone and said yes, my family said, is there a dance where you can stand there and then move awkwardly? And for the first 6 or 7 lessons, I just could not get it. And finally the instructor just said, hey, people can do this. Just pay attention and visualize this and you'll be able to do it. And eventually it came.
What a great story of perseverance. So there's tool number 1, nurture hope that recovery from trauma is possible, and then keep persevering. What is the connection between growing yourself and growing others? Stay tuned to find out. I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. Today we are speaking with Chuck Peters, president of the Gazette Company, and we have been talking about your personal story of resilience and how you came across research later in life that kind of helped you look back and understand that. Another researcher we have talked about is Dr. Carol Dweck and her work on mindset. What is Carol's work?
Well, I'm not deeply familiar with Carol's work, but many people that I have read and that I've heard speak, and I've read some articles that she has written, basically talking about the kind of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And do you believe as an individual that you are some way, that you were born some way, so I'm good at this or I'm not good at this? In the previous segment we talked about, I would imagine myself as not a dancer. I would imagine myself as, before the head injury, I would say I was more in a fixed mindset. That whatever, through certain genetics, I became a good test taker, and so here I am, and so I need to do these things, and I need to prove myself all the time that I am what I am, as opposed to having the view that we are all developing, we are all changing all the time, and so the question becomes much more, what is my intent? And what do I want to pursue, and what can I learn no matter what?
I love it. And I have so many thoughts, of course, going off in my mind of how this would change your perspective, looking at a child, looking at someone as a leader. How has this changed your perspective as a leader?
Well, I'm always looking for emerging properties. Many people, when I was growing up, would want to define somebody and slot them. This is this type of person, they should be going here. And I tend to look at what are the interests, what are the passions, how can you hold the creative tension long enough to grow into it, to develop the capabilities needed. And I've seen so many situations where people would start something and then like halfway through, we all call it like the messy middle, they say, oh, isn't this really for me? I'm not sure, I'm not the right person. By just with a little bit of encouragement and perseverance, they actually develop the capabilities that they need to pursue their intentions.
I love that term, creative tension. We have under our Thrive model, the H is for high expectations, and it's that dance between holding, challenging youth and then supporting them, and challenging and supporting them. And Dwak's work is perfect for that. One context I want to make sure we get to is the flood that we had, the Great Cedar Rapids flood of 2008, and your leadership in it. So what did you observe during that time of the flood and post-recovery?
Well, try to make it quick. Our office is right downtown, and we had actually a new staff that was just starting that week, and we'd had a staff meeting on Wednesday where we were comparing notes, and someone said, the river looks a little high. And our facilities guy said, don't worry, we've talked to the city and we've talked to Alliant, and there aren't going to be any problems. That was Wednesday afternoon. By Thursday, they were taking inmates, it had rained, so they're taking inmates off the island. Water was coming up past 3rd Street, and we're on 5th, and the National Guard had shut down downtown. So we were, right in the middle of the activity, and literally could pet fish by our front door, and we're pumping 900 gallons of water a minute out of our basement. We were on the air almost all the time. We became kind of the hub for the community for information. I was amazed at how the community came together to evacuate over 20,000 people without loss of life, to really band together, to work together. It was a huge bonding time for about 5 days. And then a group of us went to Grand Forks to learn from them, and they told us the last time your community will be together is now, because you've all been traumatized and you're all going to be healing differently. And as you're healing differently, you're going in these different waves, it's going to exacerbate the tensions. And for a while, you will fall apart. And I really didn't want to believe that, but we saw it right away. We saw it as how people framed the disaster, what the next step should be. And then for me personally, we were visited by some international experts and federal experts who said, we know you've been traumatized. We know you want to get back to normal as quickly as possible. Please do not rebuild what you had. The world has changed fundamentally in the last 10 years. You should be building for what is emerging, not what you had. You've had a great run, with 150-year-old ideas, but don't be stuck with those. Take the time to reimagine. And as I expressed that, I was told by many people in the community, shut up, we've had a flood, we don't have time for that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And we find with our post-crisis work in suicide and trauma to communities that you almost need to build a timeline of, okay, this is post-crisis, here's the grieving, here's the immediate stabilization and recovery, then the middle part of getting the work done, and then you move into the long term. But from the beginning, I do believe we also need visionaries, as you are, and other voices in our community, to say, but let's look at what we want to create. Let's look at the possibilities and hold out that vision to kind of have it pull us forward. So I know that there's a lot of similarities with our work. What lessons are you carrying forward, or what did you learn from the experience? It's been 6 years now.
Well, one of the things that really struck me was there were some families that had almost equal disasters. So there were some families that were situated where they lost their home, their school, their job, their church. You think about the level of trauma that the families experienced, right? And that totally crushed one family, and another family thrived with the exact same experience. And so many in the community have been wondering about, what is this thing, resiliency? Why do people act with this almost exact same fact pattern? Why the difference? And so really understanding the importance of context and connections. To me, it was one of the greatest learnings.
And that's my life's work, understanding, asking those type of questions and exploring what is this resiliency. So I love the point that you made, and here's our takeaway. We think of resilience as the exception. We are resilient beings. So view growth after trauma as a normal part of human functioning. From personal resilience to regional and even global resilience, and the impact on creativity. Connecting more dots when we come back. Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. Today we are speaking with Chuck Peters, president of the Gazette Company. We have talked about stories of personal resilience, community resilience, and now we're even going to use a broader lens because you are an expert in the global economy or global environment, I would say, and it's quickly changing. So what is going on in our global environment?
Well, in about as quickly as I can say it, we have generally had, for the last 100 years or so, an industrial producer-consumer society, and most of the global activity has been done by very large institutions with relatively centralized control, either large corporations or governments. What has happened relatively rapidly in the last 5 or 10 years is a move towards an authentic, networked global economy, where individuals are making connections across boundaries that were almost impossible before, and are actually creating these substantive and authentic relationships that are working toward value creation. And there are huge changes in the amount of capital that's needed to start new activities, the ways in which to start new activities. And so it used to be you wanted to hierarchically organize the resources, and now you want to build very powerful and effective networks.
Wow. So in the last 5 or 10 years, of course, I'm thinking, what a time to live. Like it's happening right before our eyes.
Right.
Okay. Can you boil down kind of a few core concepts or key pieces of this change that we can hold on to?
Well, as core as I can make it is, it used to be you would want to fit in to the machine, right? There's this great machine that's working and you would like to have your material needs met, so please fit into this machine. Now it's much more, how do I truly express what I want and find others anywhere in the world who want a similar thing, and then how do we co-create together what it is we want to achieve. A very different game.
And let's give this a context to bring it home for our viewers. In this area, this is called the Creative Corridor.
Right, well, in this area, the reason that we went to the Creative Corridor is because in this global economy, people are making decisions as to where to create their business or where to live, right? Where to live, work, and play. And the research is pretty clear that when they are making those decisions, they are looking for the amenities that are available in an area of no less than 500,000 people. That's generally what they're looking for. And so they want that diversity of experience, the cultural and recreational opportunities that are available in an area of about this size. And if you can have a research institution like the University of Iowa, that's a huge attractor. So for us, in order to be on the global map, we have to be one of the satellites of Chicago and well known as a defined region of 500,000 people. So we had to agree on what the region was and have a name for it, and then be able to say what the promise of that region is. So in this global economy, so many things are so easy to be copied, but there's one thing you cannot copy, and that's the ability of a group of people to make something new happen. That's the value-added activity. So once we knew the geography, which is basically the same as Kirkwood's service area, the 7-county region here in eastern Iowa, we had to have a name for it, and we chose Iowa's Creative Corridor. When I say we, there were like 1,500 people involved in this activity and many institutions, many individuals. But it boiled down to, with the work of a consultant, Iowa's Creative Corridor. And then what's our promise to the world? We actually know how to make new things happen. We create here. So think of Nike, just do it. Mm-hmm. The company is Nike, their brand promise is just do it. Our region is Iowa's Creative Corridor, and our brand promise is we create here.
And what have been some of the outcomes in the last year or two?
Well, one of the big outcomes that I've seen is a real push by many individuals to create a welcoming and innovative culture. So I look at the work of Diversity Focus, I look at the work of Seed Here, I look at the work that Kirkwood and the Iowa City Area Development Group have done, and the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance, to generate activities. I'm thinking all kinds of examples like Creative Week, like EntreFest, like the Workplace Revolution event that just occurred last week, the startup weekends that have happened in Iowa City and Cedar Rapids, where very diverse people come together and make new things happen. I could go on and on. The makerspace that's out with the Science Center. So there's just a lot of bubbling activity. The new Iowa Accelerator that's going to take place in New Bow, that Eric Engelman and Geonetric are making part of their new space there by the New Bow City Market. Just see all that kind of bubbling activity that really was not happening 3 years ago.
The Big Idea School, we featured them on our show.
Yes.
Does that fall within
this?
Yes,
it does. It certainly does. How can you take juniors and seniors in high school and get them to learn what they need to learn by following their passions, right? That's a great example.
So meeting the needs of youth. Again, what I find so exciting about this work is you can sit here and you've probably just scratched the surface on talking about what we have here that wasn't even in our minds probably 2 brief years ago.
Right.
Very, very exciting. So this is our final takeaway: to nurture creativity, create an environment where people feel appreciated, enjoy diverse experiences, and have fun as they do meaningful work. Thank you for joining us on Resiliency Matters on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.